Hello, and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber of commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, President and CEO of OBI, and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. I am so excited today. I'm in the office of Dan Schwoerer, who founded Bullseye Glass more than 50 years ago. So I'm in Southeast Portland, here at Bullseye, which manufactures colored glass used by artists around the world at this Portland facility. I was lucky enough to get a tour of the plant a couple of years ago, and I can tell you it is an amazing place. You know, if Willy Wonka made glass instead of chocolate, it would probably look like Bullseye Glass. So I am far from the only fan of Bullseye Glass, and we know this from the long history and success of the company, but also because this fall, Bullseye won OBI's third annual Coolest Thing Made in Oregon contest. For those who aren't familiar, the contest places 16 of the state's coolest products on a bracket, much like a certain basketball tournament I will not mention here for copyright reasons. But these products are chosen from well over 100 nominated from all over the state. And once they're on that bracket, those 16 finalists are narrowed through a series of online votes until the coolest product remains standing. And this year, that was Bullseye's art glass. So Dan, thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to talking with you.
Well, thank you, Angela, for this opportunity. As well, thank you and OBI for all the work you do in helping promote businesses in Oregon, especially manufacturing.
Oh, our pleasure. It is a fun job to get to do and a privilege to be able to do it. So, okay, so let's start a little back in time to give people some history here. It's now an established business in Southeast Portland, and Bullseye ships glass all over the world. But getting to this point, which we'll come back to, took a lot of hard work. So tell us a little bit about you and your background, why you settled in Portland, and how you came to start the company.
Okay, well, it wasn't a lot of hard work. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, well, even better.
But I was raised on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the 60s, was there from 61 to 69, slow learner, where I studied art and architecture. And that's where I got introduced to glass. Harvey Littleton, who was the chairman of the art department, who was also sort of the father of the contemporary glass movement in this country. And that's what got me really excited about glass. I moved to Portland in 1969, and with a fellow classmate from the university, set up a small glass-blowing studio in Portland, under the Ross Island Bridge, actually. And we traveled up and down the West Coast and across the country at art fairs. And as we would be interacting with other artists, we ran into a lot of stained glass artists who said, hey, we have trouble getting colored glass, that there were only 3 glass manufacturers in the United States, and they were all back-ordered years. So why don't you guys make glass? So we thought, wow, what a great idea. So with a third glass blower, we started Bullseye Glass in 1974 to make colored glass for stained glass artists.
It's so fascinating, and I think it's one of those products that for those of us who just are in the observing world of the glass, we take it for granted. It's everywhere, but to hear that, especially when it comes to the colored glass, there was such limited amount of it being made here is just one of those things you don't think about sort of as an average member of the public. So that's how you started, and like any business, over time you've had to innovate to meet your customers where they are and what they needed. So how have your products and processes evolved over the years to serve or maybe even drive some consumer tastes and needs?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I said, we started out making color glass for stained glass, but it wasn't really our passion. Our passion was really to get colored glass into sculptural and architectural uses. And that required getting rid of the lead line and stained glass. So we embarked on a program to develop a palette of colored glasses that would all fit together, be what we call compatible. And for some reason, this had eluded the colored glass world for centuries, literally. And after about 5 or 6 years of experimentation, we finally figured out how to do this and started making a palette of colored glasses that could be fused together in a kiln and wouldn't break apart later, being exposed to weather or hot sun or whatever. And this opened up a whole new way to work with glass. Unfortunately, there wasn't a market for it because it was new, right? So we first, in a VW microbus, started going up and down the West Coast with sheets of glass, running into artists at art fairs or stopping off at colleges and art schools and trying to convince young artists to work in this material, right?
Sort of an "and if you build it, they will come."
Yes,
dream.
exactly. Except we had to go find them, but it was the 70s, and so then we started going across the country to art schools and getting more serious art programs to start using this material. Eventually went to Europe, worked with the Royal College of Art in London, and at the same time, we realized how important it was to establish this process as something really important in the art world or accepted in the art world. So my wife and I started a gallery in the Pearl District to show the artworks, and then we started going to art fairs across the country, LA, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, London, showing these works, and then also working with, and all this time working with artists across the world, especially in Australia. There was a whole group there, and worked with museums to convince curators there that this was really something of the future, and getting works purchased by patrons to get into museums, and that really established it. And this took about 10 years, and then it really became a great market for us, which it is still today.
Yeah, it's that's so fascinating, and it wasn't as easy in the 70s to spread the word, if you will.
No, we didn't have the internet,
Yeah.
but in some ways it was so much more fun because people, talked to each other, and interacted with each other, and did a lot of other things together that freed us through, with the wind of the 60s at our back, right?
Well, and it allowed you to take examples in the artwork and to people, it forced you to do that because you didn't have an alternative. You had to get it out there, and people then got to really see it and understand what you were talking about in 3D.
Yeah. And since it is a physical thing, it's about making to begin with. So, the physical contact, the interaction was really quite wonderful.
So speaking of making, one of the other things I find very interesting is the architectural fabrication studio and that aspect of this. I mean, you mentioned that you had studied art and architecture, and we'll talk about some of the buildings maybe here in the conversation as well, where people can see your glass. But talk a little bit about the studio. Why did you create that? What happens there? And again, remind people where they can go and see some of the work.
All right. Well, we started the studio to really push the envelope, especially in the architectural side. And, because we had this factory behind us that was, at this point, making money and being successful, so we can invest in equipment and taking on projects that smaller studios couldn't risk. So we would do things that would probably fail the first couple of times we did them, but eventually we would come up with a way to so the outcome was what we were looking for.
Sure.
So it was really to push the envelope and drive this process into the art world and the architectural world.
Yeah, so I worked in Washington, D.C. for a little bit and always have admired some of the architecture there, including the top of the U.S. Capitol building.
Right.
So talk about that project, because my guess is people listening are like, what is she talking about? But your glass is there in the U.S. Capitol in the replacement building, in the replacement windows that they did in that project.
Yes, it was the cupola. There was 32 windows, if I recall correctly, and they were quite large. I think almost 8 feet tall. They look small from the ground.
Sure.
So they were originally made in England in 1864. They were actually brought over by the Roosevelt family, who had a glass company in New York. Anyway, we ended up getting the contract to do the replacement windows, and we were able to make period-accurate replacements because of the equipment we have here is literally from the way glass was made in the 19th and 20th century, right? I mean, the 18th and 19th century. So we were able to do this, except we made it even one step better. The original glass was rolled onto a metal table, the molten glass. So we built a big 4 by 10 foot water-cooled metal table to roll the glass out on. But instead of doing a piece 3/4 of an inch thick, we did 2 pieces 3/8 of an inch thick, and then laminated them together, so it became one unit as a safety glass unit, so that if a rock somehow goes through one of these, it could break the window, but pieces of it wouldn't fall down on our congressman. Although I don't know if I would do that today, because I think having a piece of glass hit some of our congressmen in the head might knock some sense into their heads.
Okay, yeah, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue that point with you at all. But I like the logic and the ingenuity behind the product. Yeah. We can talk about current utility at some other.
But there is one project we did in Portland that's quite visible.
Yes, I was going to ask about this.
That's the Multnomah County Central Courthouse, which you can even see from outside. You don't even have to get out of your car. It's, I believe, 25 feet by 74 feet, composed of 120 panels, 3 by 5 feet, that were designed by an artist from the Chicago Art Institute, and we did the fabrication, and it's a pretty spectacular piece.
It is stunning, and if people have not had a chance, like you said, to even just walk by, you don't need to go inside. But it is stunning, and when you think about the individuality of those pieces, and then the amalgamation of the whole installation, it's eye-catching. There's no other word for it.
Yeah, and it's part of this whole process of kiln forming, and because we worked with so many artists who primarily were painters, printmakers, that ilk of individual, they came up with methodologies of working with these materials that are literally painting with glass, and they even call it painting with light, because colored light comes through. We also did an incredible project in Leawood, Kansas, the Church of the Resurrection, which we don't do much church work, but that happened to be, it was for a mega church that the minister was the presiding minister for Barack Obama's second inauguration, Reverend Hamilton. He has 22,000 parishioners.
Oh, gosh.
Anyway, it's a huge window the size of a basketball court, again, made up of fused panels. But there they still wanted it to look like a stained glass window to meet with, religious tradition. So they cut it up into different shapes and put lead in it. But it's a tremendous piece if you're ever in Leawood. And we went to the opening, and it was incredible because the parishioners were driving up from on Harley-Davidson motorcycles to Rolls-Royce cars to pickup trucks. So
that is a variety, but I guess
so. Reverend Hamilton really has a following.
Yeah, I'd say, and 22,000 people. I guess you'd expect a little range,
diversity.
But yeah, that's interesting that project kind of almost came full circle for the problem you were trying to solve for. you did it so well that they ended up
Yeah,
wanting your
exactly.
product even when they wanted the old school look. So I think it's fascinating, and I think also demonstrates the diverse ways that people are utilizing this product in art and design and thinking about you've really fundamentally shifted the way people think about how they can use glass
Exactly.
in something, and
Yeah.
it's just very cool. I will not brag about the coaster that I made on my visit here. I mean, it's a fine piece of art, let me tell you. But it is well fused and a beautiful color of glass.
All
so
right.
I thank you for that. My skill set is not quite up to snuff for what some of these
Well,
folks
we'll
are
work
doing.
on that.
All right, thank you. So I want to touch one more thing. You've mentioned a couple times, work in other states. You've talked about your work in getting the product into other countries early on and getting that kind of adoption worldwide of the concept and what you were doing. But you still use materials that originate in other countries in your process, correct? Yeah. So I'm going to switch to policy for a second.
Okay.
So how have the many conversations, I guess, to describe it, around tariffs, how has that treated you?
Okay, well, as you know, it's been very chaotic. And yes, it has impacted us and our customers, especially rare earths coming in from China. There are some that we still cannot even get to this day, and other raw materials that we bring in from different countries. And what we're doing is we're actually, because we have fairly low margins in the manufacturing of our product, we are passing those costs along. So our customers are bearing the brunt of that.
Sure.
And it has impacted sales to a small degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a common story, but had to ask. I'm gonna ask another one. I mean, you are a manufacturing business. At the end of the day, you are manufacturing glass, and for folks who aren't familiar, it actually comes in various forms. You've got the sheets of glass of varying sizes. You've got the frit, which is the smaller pieces of it, but you do that here. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities about being a manufacturer in Portland or Oregon?
Yeah, well, certainly some of the opportunities, the biggest opportunity is Oregon, and Portland in particular, is a very creative environment. So we are able to get employees who really relate to creative activities. We have a lot of musicians who work here because it's a creative place. We have a studio called the Bees Bullseye Employee Studio, Bee Studio, I guess it's called, where they can then, after hours, get glass from the factory and work on projects of their own. But on the challenging side, I mean, 30 years ago, most of the agencies here were very cooperative, supportive. They would help you get through various permitting processes, and they were just helpful. Today, it's just the opposite. I mean, you almost feel like you're going into the criminal justice system where there's no trust. They just don't trust you. And it has not been helpful.
Yeah, you're not alone there. We did a survey of small businesses, and of the 500 that responded, more than 70% said they felt like state agencies were more interested in finding wrongdoing than in helping companies comply. And that's disappointing and sad. And at the end of the day, compliance is what helps us reach whatever the regulatory goal was. So, a little more of that symbiotic customer service type mentality would be welcome.
I can give you a couple of examples. 30 years ago, we put in an oxygen system to burn our natural gas with oxygen instead of air. It reduced our carbon footprint by 40%.
Wow.
But DEQ chooses to charge us $8,500 a year because we have an oxygen tank.
So even though you're doing the thing that the department would presumably want to see you do by reducing carbon emissions.
Yeah. And another example, recently we had an older small generator for backup lighting that we upgraded to a much more fuel-efficient natural gas generator. And they chose to charge us a $5,000 fee to replace this existing generator, even though it was using less fuel and reduced our carbon footprint. But again, they didn't have to do this. They chose to apply this fee. So they're just not working in the right direction.
That's interesting. And again, if we're focused on the outcomes, it seems to me that you were driving towards the better outcome.
Yes.
And got penalized for that.
It felt that way.
Yeah. That may or may not have been the intention, but that's how it felt. So, well, congratulations on being the 2025 coolest thing made in Oregon. We have a lot of cool products made here, so it's got to be pretty neat to have risen to the top of that competition. I personally loved how it was you and Daimler Truck North America's Western Star X series, like their heavy duty vocational trucks, and this beautiful art glass. So I even posted on one of the channels, I wonder how much glass could fit in one of those trucks. So congratulations. But I also think that's emblematic of something you were talking about earlier, that, we do have a lot of innovation and creativity in Oregon, and there's a lot of interesting manufacturing happening here because of that. So thank you for being part of that community and for participating in our contest. Let me flip that a little bit from the product, which was designated coolest thing made in Oregon. What, in your opinion, is the coolest thing about Bullseye Glass?
I think the coolest thing about Bullseye Glass is the international community that we've built over the 51 years that we've been in business. I think we have over 85,000 people in this community of ours in over 100 countries.
Wow.
And to me, that has been, I think, our coolest accomplishment.
Yeah, and what are there parts of the world that are more densely interested in Bullseye?
Oh, yes,
or?
yes. I mean, our largest customer base is in the UK, partly because we work very closely with the Royal College of Art in London, and the students that come out of there have driven a lot of growth. And but Europe in general and Japan are our largest markets outside of the United States.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, I've said it a dozen times. You've said it sometimes. Bullseye Glass. I got to know, where did the name come from?
Interesting. Okay, well, the name Bullseye originates from back in medieval times when window glass was made by taking a gob of glass on an iron rod and spinning it into a dish shape, and then where it broke off of the rod, it formed a shape like an eye, but it was thick and thin, and it couldn't be used for a window pane, so it was basically waste and got remelted. But the workers would take these, and they called them bullseyes, and they would let them together. And if you've ever been in old pubs in England or Paris, you'll see those circular shapes with a kind of a eye in the center called bulls, and they were literally called bullseyes. So how appropriate, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I am guessing that was a new trivia fact for most people listening to this, that they can tuck away in their database of knowledge. We're getting close to, unfortunately, our limit on time. We've promised people a relatively short podcast, even though I could have these conversations for hours on end. I got to ask, because OBI is what it is and we do what we do. Is there anything you'd like policymakers to know about doing business in Oregon, or about your company in particular?
Okay. Well, I'd like certainly Oregonians to know that Bullseye, started by 3 artists in the backyard of a small house in southeast Portland in 1974, and grew to this internationally recognized company with 121 employees, bringing over $20 million a year into the state. And that was possible because back then, this city, this state was supportive, open, and today I would just like to say to policymakers that I couldn't start a company like Bullseye today in the environment that exists in this state due to regulations and the way they're applied and enforced, and that should change.
Yeah, that would be a tragedy if you hadn't formed, and makes you wonder what companies maybe aren't here.
Yeah, what entrepreneurs are wanting to start a business but can't because there's system fees, there's these fees, there's permitting, there's all of this, and there's no support, there's no help.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that gives us something to chew on too at OBI about how we can help with that. All right. So I mentioned I'm here at your facility. Where can people who want to learn more about the company or its products, or maybe get into this beautiful world as a hobby, where can they learn more?
Okay, well, they can, check out studio.bullseyeglass.com and see what we make, or they can come to any of our resource centers, one of which is right here in Portland, in Southeast Portland, and we do everything from teach classes to we have online classes, etc. So
good. Well, I encourage folks to do it. I encourage folks who are physically nearby one of the resource centers to stop in. It is beautiful and eye-opening and just fascinating, no matter what your interest. And then folks can obviously hop online and see some of the extraordinary examples we've talked about. And I just want to point out too, we're talking about people who can take your product and make the smallest and most delicate of artisan craft products, all the way up to, like you said, these massive plates of glass that are put together into a wall-sized installation, and so that the variety there is pretty extraordinary. So I encourage people to check it out. Okay, any last words before we sign off?
Become a maker.
That's good. I like that. We should get you. That should be a T-shirt. Become a maker. There, you heard it yourself from Dan Schwoerer, the founder of Bullseye Glass Company here in Portland. Thank you, Dan, for joining me on the podcast. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. Oregon Business and Industry is proud to put the Oregon Business Matters podcast out there for your enjoyment. Our episodes can be found on all the top podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. For more information about Bullseye, visit studio.bullseyeglass.com.
Correct.
Yes. And for more information about OBI, visit OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much.